horror stories when you're alone at home. Like any other night after work, I was at home making dinner. It was perhaps 6 o'clock at night, and I had only been home from work for an hour. I only had a small chicken breast and some cold corn to cook. I was done with the chicken and starting to drain the water from the corn when I heard a light scratching sound in the house. The sound was short and not very loud, but it made me jump a little because it was so strange. I kept doing what I was doing because I thought the house was making a strange sound that I had never heard before. But at the same time, that sound of scraping could be heard through the walls. I didn't know what to think about that sound because it was so strange. After quickly plating my food, I went to the front door to listen for it again and try to figure out where it was coming from. I didn't hear anything for about 25 seconds, so I went back to the table to eat. There was still no thought in my mind about it at this point. I was just interested in why the house was making that noise. I wasn't scared at all. First, I ate for a short time, then I went to the couch to rest and watch some Netflix. But I kept hearing that annoying scraping sound over and over again during the show. At one point, it was so annoying that I turned off the TV and listened while I waited. The sound came again, and this time I could hear it better coming from upstairs. I quickly walked up to the second floor. The house was still making my night miserable, but I was also a little more worried that there might be something wrong with it. I waited for the sound again in the hallway when I got to the top of the stairs. There was silence for a minute, so I checked each room to make sure everything was okay. It didn't look like anything was broken or out of the ordinary, so I was getting worse and more worried. Putting on my shoes, I went outside. It was dark, but I thought I might be able to see something like a tree scraping against the house. I knew there was a tree on the side of the house, but it wasn't windy, and the branches weren't even close to the side. As I stood there, I couldn't help but wonder how this was happening, and why it started tonight. This was the last thing I wanted to do, because I was tired. Back to the front of the house I went, and as I walked toward the front door, a flash of light caught my eye. I looked around, and it seemed to be coming from the front of the house. I walked further down the driveway along the path and turned around to look back. In a dark room in my house, I saw a small light coming from one of the windows. I saw it was the upstairs window after a few seconds. The light was moving around like someone was shining a flashlight around. I was scared to death that someone was doing something in my attic. I stood outside and called the cops while I looked out the window and watched the light slowly move around. But while I was on the phone, the light dimmed and then came straight at me. They left it there for a few seconds and then turned it off. I could hear a few loud thuds from outside. I ran over to my neighbor's yard right away and tried to explain what was going on while being scared and looking over at my house. It looked quiet and peaceful from where I was. But that made it scarier because I knew something bad was probably going on inside. But after a while, no one saw anything else, and the police finally got there. First, they searched the house, and then they brought me inside to talk. In the attic, they found several sets of shoe prints. They thought it was probably a group of teens messing around with me and not trying to hurt me. It was nice that there were no signs of anyone living there or anything. But they did find some carvings in the wooden beams. The designs weren't very specific. They were mostly just lines. Again, the police told me that the kids were probably just joking around and trying to make me angry. When asked how they got in, they say they might have climbed up on the roof and come in through a window while I was at work. They did, however, leave through the space in the roof of the attic and my back door. They were sure it was just a harmless group of kids, but that doesn't make me feel any safer. The thought that someone broke into my house and camped out there all day and night while I was there makes me feel very uneasy. Who knows what the group was really planning to do? Those police officers didn't know what the group's goals were either. Story 2. I grew up in a normal area. Our family lived in a nice, average-sized house. We got a small dog named Max when I was 7 years old. He was my best friend for years, but as I got older, I spent more time by myself. But Max was always with me, so I never really felt alone. That being said, this didn't last forever. My family sold our house when I turned 17 and moved 23 minutes away to a smaller, more remote house in the woods. Sadly, Max died that summer from old age, but I was glad it was summer because I could cry at home without having to go to school or anything. Things went back to normal after a few days of sad times as a family over the death of our first dog. They went back to work, but I stayed home for summer break. But I could tell right away that something was different. This was the first time in my life that I was really home alone, without Max always being there with me. Every little sound that came from the house made me feel uncomfortable and paranoid. Plus, we had only lived there for a few months, so I didn't really know the area or feel safe inside yet. Anyway, it was just another normal day, a week after Max died. While they went to work, I stayed home. With only one story, the house was set up in a straight line. The kitchen and living room are right outside the front door. And then there's a long hallway with 2 rooms on either side, and my parents' bedroom at the very end. Since I've been by myself for a week, I've always gone down the hallway and shut all the bedroom doors. I didn't like seeing open doors in the hallway. It made me feel strange, and today was the same. I walked down the hall and shut each door before reaching my parents' room. I pushed the door through the opening and started to walk back, but I realized right away that I hadn't heard the door fully close. I went around again and this time pulled the door shut more firmly. I could hear the click as it locked in place. While I was in my room, I shut the door and put on my headphones to watch YouTube for almost 2 hours straight. But there wasn't much else to do at this point. It was about 8 a.m., and I was ready for food. It was time to go out, so I opened my door and walked out into the hallway. In the corner of my eye, I could tell something wasn't right as I walked out the door and turned toward the living room. When I turned around to look back down the hallway, I stopped dead in my tracks. The door at the end of the hallway was wide open. I mean very open. I stood there for a minute, trying not to make a sound and see if anyone was moving in my parents' room. I didn't know what to do at this point, though. I was pretty sure that someone was in the house because I knew I had locked that door and it couldn't open by itself. But I hadn't heard anything, so I didn't know where they were. By now, they could have been in any room of the house. I chose to walk slowly and quietly through the living room and into the kitchen, turning my head all the time because I was afraid they were hidden somewhere. When I got to the kitchen, I grabbed one of my parents' big steak knives and held it tightly in my right hand. I felt a little better, but I was still scared. Second, I carefully checked the living room and dining room again to make sure the thief wasn't hiding anywhere. Then I stood at the end of the hallway. There was an extra bedroom downstairs. I tried to open the door quietly, but it was old and creaking. Nothing seemed to have moved at all. Everything looked like it was just the way it was. I walked away and shut the door. The room with the open door was my parents' bedroom, so I saved it for last. I was scared. The house being in the middle of a forest and the fact that there was no help close didn't help. It took me another minute to hold the knife and listen, while standing at the opening and only being able to see half of my parents' bed. There was complete silence. I shook and called out, but there was no answer. Fear kept building up inside me. I put on a brave face, but I knew it was all a show. I walked inside and looked around the corner. It looked empty, just like the other rooms, with nothing moving. I knelt down and looked under the bed, but no one was there. As I crossed the bed to the other side, I heard a soft thud from behind me. That's when I saw a small bit of dirt on the floor. My heart was beating fast as I jumped and stared at the closed bathroom door. In there, I could hear a lot of noise and see a faint shape from under the door. I stood there in fear for a few seconds before hearing one last thud, and then the sound of footsteps outside the house. I carefully walked over and opened the door, but right away I saw that the window was open. I was still shocked by what had just happened. I shut it down and locked it quickly, then ran to my room to get my phone. I'm not sure why I never called the cops. Maybe I was too young and didn't want them to come over when no one was there. I know I should have just left the house and called the police though, now that I think about it. Anyway, I first called my parents, who then called the cops and got home quickly. During their investigation, they found small pieces of dirt from someone's shoe almost everywhere in the house, except in my room. They knew there was only one person there, but for some reason, they didn't take anything. Our house had everything we needed. It was clear that this was very creepy and strange, which made the intruder's intentions even more troubling. A few months later, we moved out because the house had other problems. After all these years, I still think about this meeting every once in a while. If I didn't have headphones on and heard someone come in, I probably would have looked and seen them. I wonder what would have happened. It scares me to think about it, but I'm glad that everything worked out, even though the burglar was never caught. Story 3. My name is Damon, and I'm 28 years old. I rent a very small house close to where I work. My life has never been this bad before, but since then, I've been very careful about who I hang out with. During the week, I started the day like any other. I went to work, came home, made dinner, and then watched a show or movie on the couch. I liked staying up a little later than normal on Fridays, but sometimes my eyes wouldn't let me. Around 8 o'clock, I put on a movie and fell asleep during it. I didn't wake up until I heard a loud, sudden sound. It was my phone making a sound I had never heard before. The bright screen on it made me squint as I picked it up from the coffee table. It was a Facebook message notice. When I opened it, it took me right to the Facebook Messenger app, which I had never used before. I didn't know what to think when I got a text message from a guy saying hello. His name looked familiar, but he wasn't one of my close friends. When I clicked on his page, I saw that we had one friend in common and had been Facebook friends for 4 months. This made me remember when I accepted his invite. To be honest, I'll accept anyone's call as long as we are friends. Since I don't share too much personal information online, it never really bothered me. Simply to be nice, I went back to the Messenger app and said, "Hi." But I couldn't help but think about how late it was and how strange it was to text someone at this time. As soon as I sent it, the 3 dots showed up to show that someone was typing, and then a new message read it. I gasped and dropped my phone on the table while looking out the window. It said in the text, "I love that movie too. We should watch it together." But there was nothing outside my window. It was pitch black. When I realized that someone was watching me, I started to shake. It made me feel even worse that I didn't know how long they'd been watching. Then I heard my phone beep again and saw that it had a new message. I was so scared that I couldn't move and couldn't even look at the message. Before the doorbell rang, I felt so strange that I couldn't even tell you how long I was frozen there. When I jumped again, I had tears in my eyes from being so scared. I picked up the phone and called 911. While I was crying and feeling exhausted, I tried to explain what was going on as best I could. I called and was told that someone would be there in 5 minutes. They told me to lock myself in a room and wait for help to come. I agreed, trying to cool down. As I hung up the phone, another message came through, and then another and another. My phone kept beeping, and I finally put it on silent. I just barely managed to open them, and saw about 12 or 16 messages in all caps from the man telling me to open the door. The last message just said, "Never mind." I had no idea what that meant, but it didn't take long for me to figure it out when I heard a soft bang from the other side of the house. It was very quiet though, like it was far away. I stood still and listened for a moment before another one, this one louder, echoed through the hallway by the kitchen. This time I could hear it better and figure out it was coming from the basement. I quickly ran to my bedroom because I heard a much bigger bang, then something breaking. When I locked myself in the room, I couldn't stop crying because I was so scared of what was going on. I could hear the man coming up the stairs and through the basement. Even though I knew the downstairs door was locked, I was afraid the man would break in at any time. Then I heard the doorknob rattling and several pushes, like someone was trying to get through it. Then I heard 3 loud knocks on the front door. "Police! Open up!" I ran to the front door, unlocked it, and let them in. There were 2 male police officers there, and I think they could see the worry in my eyes. I quickly pointed to the basement door and told them that he was inside. They grabbed their guns right away and ran in. As the police opened the door and carefully followed the thief down the steps, they could hear his steps. After a short fight, they caught the man. Just to keep it short, the man broke in through the window in the basement. That's why there was noise? So, he was the man on Facebook? I thought he was using a fake account or something, but it turned out to be him. He broke in for no reason other than what seemed like just wanting to talk to me. That had never happened to me before, so it was very strange and creepy. I thought these kinds of things only happened in movies. In the late part of that week, I deleted from my list of friends anyone I didn't know personally. I feel bad having to do that, but I guess that's just the way things are now.